Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to what was supposed to be round 3 of the Chris Knott Insurance British Touring Car Championship. Unfortunately, we are having a couple of server issues tonight, which means this will be a non-championship round, slash a bit of a test session, if you will, where the drivers are getting familiar with this, one of, I think, for me personally, one of the most anticipated cars of the season. It's the 156 WTCC, nearly 500 horsepower, under a ton. And the report so far has been that this is a really fun car to drive. Of course, if you joined us for testing earlier on in the year, you saw this heading around Silverstone, and it was good to watch. The drivers didn't have any experience with the car, and it looked like they were really getting to grips with it. Drivers are complaining about a little bit of understeer, as Alan Matthews demonstrates for us there. And they have noted during their practice so far that the hards are too hard for a compound and the softs are probably a little bit too soft to make the race. So it looks like if we were to have some proper championship racing action, the mediums will be the tyres to go for. We are currently on board with Alan Matthews as he heads round Druids. Although, notice how we currently have a little bit of car Chinese whispers going on in terms of delivery. This is Alan Matthews. He's currently in Adam Holder's car, as Will Harper goes third fastest with 11 minutes of qualifying remaining. He is borrowing Paul Millman's car for tonight, so I hope everyone's been respectful and looking after each other's car. George Brooke Battersby takes fourth position, also in Paul Millman's car, actually, as Colin Knief sets his first lap so far in Adam Holder's car and goes second fastest. It's Rob Whitney in P1 at the moment. Pardon me, it's Andrew Whitehead in P1 at the moment in Rob Whitney's car. There was the confusion. That's a lovely looking livery actually on Rob Whitney's car as he heads round Paddock Hill Bend and into the tight hairpin for another quick lap. So yeah, this 156 is an interesting car. Obviously the real-life counterpart, the regular 156 road car, as Greg Young starts a new fast lap, so we'll stay on board with him as Matt Denny exits the pits there. Round Paddock Hill Bend goes Greg Young. How brave are you? It's one of the scariest corners of any British track for me personally, is Paddock Hill Bend, as you fly in deep under braking, trying to not lose the back end, but also trying to screw off enough speed to not understeer straight into the gravel. But yes, so this 156, unlike its real-life counterpart, a front-wheel drive or four-wheel drive car, this is rear-wheel drive. So there's a lot of effort has gone into this awesome-looking mod, and yeah, it seems to handle pretty well. One note to make actually is the driver's reporting a little bit of sensitivity in situations like over the curbs, specifically at Druids. Apparently the car can get a little bit unhappy with you. But also things like dipping onto the grass a little bit can upset the car, so that's one for the drivers to watch out for as they try to extend as much as possible. Andrew Whitehead saying actually he didn't have that much practice in the car, but this setup, which is Colin Knief's setup, we are very grateful. He always provides a nice setup to help the other drivers out. Andrew Whitehead saying he was really gelling with this setup actually, and it is showing so far. He's currently got 3/4 of a second ahead of Colin Knief. With 8 minutes to go in this qualifying session, it looks like so far he's been pretty much unchallenged, although Colin Knief will be hot on his heels, I am sure. And it looks like Colin actually has been fortunate enough to receive his own livery. He has gone, oh no he's not, ignore me, yes, it's Colin Knief ahead of Colin Knief in Colin Knief's car, as Colin is in Adam's car. Get me? Good. Colin Knief was 3/10 of a second faster on the previous sector. That's William Bliss out in front. He'll trying to use a little bit of slipstream as he heads down towards the clock curve. Obviously, a very technical part of the track. Well, not too technical, but it's one you don't want to mess up because you can lose a lot of time by jumping onto that gravel. And Colin Knief takes pole position there with a 121.2, nearly half a second quicker than Andrew Whitehead. Very well done to Colin so far. He's got 8 minutes to go, and that's a very nice time indeed, I am sure. Andrew will be hoping to beat that. He certainly got the pace with him this weekend. We see quite a few cars on track at the moment actually. We have about 12 cars on track. Yeah, there's only one person in the pits at the moment, and that is Will Inglis. So drivers really trying to set those times as we have Alan Matthews hunting down Steve Knight here during qualifying. Always good to see a little bit of battling at any point during the weekend, and unfortunately for Steve Knight in Greg Young's car there, he got it just a little bit wrong at Sterling's. and have to dive onto the gravel there as Matt Daly joins us now in this session, running Will Inglis's car, and posts a 122.6 there. Very nice lap indeed from Matt on his first time out. That, I am sure, will come flying down. As we see, actually, Matt getting it just a little bit wrong in the background there. Very lucky to keep it out of the tyre wall. He'll be able to carry on onto another lap and improve his time, I am sure, as Will Harper improves and sets a 122.8. He is currently running 5th position, as we see him having to return to the pit box from the gravel there. So while this won't be contributing towards the championship standings that we have going on in this very interesting battle so far, we are supposed to be at round 3 at the moment. This will be a valuable bit of experience for these drivers as Andrew Whitehead closes the gap down to just under 0.2 of a second. He is really flying this weekend and could be on for a very good result indeed. His previous win came at the 75 race in round 1. He was doing the workout there in round 1 and set well, he classed the field towards the end of that race. Colin having some issues off track at a couple of points, battling through the field in those Alfa 75s, those tricky old cars. Much like we saw in round 1, Andrew Whitehead absolutely flying so far this weekend, really challenging Colin this time round. As we see, 2 clones actually heading down the circuit. We have George Brook Battersby, and that looks to be, I'm not entirely sure who that is, I believe that is Will Harper. It is indeed Will Harper, is it? No, it's not. It is, not quite sure who that is, but we have 3 Paul Millmans out on track at the moment. Actually, is that the real Paul Millman? That is the real Paul Millman, everyone. I can confirm, heading round the Clark curve right now and enjoying the tow from the car in front. However, I'm not sure he wants it as we head down Paddock Hill Bend. He'll be able to use that car in front as a reference. However, I'm sure he'll be wanting him to get out of the way as quickly as possible as we enter the final 5 minutes of qualifying now. It's Colin Keneath currently in P1, Andrew Whitehead in P2, and Matt Daly still P3 for the moment. Yeah, the battling has been intense so far in this qualifying session. There's a nice little fight for P3 forming at the moment that has just become a little more balanced towards Matt Daly's P3 at the moment. He's just set a 122.4 there and has increased the gap a little bit. But you see P4 to P6, there's only 700 of a second in it. We see someone going quite far off there. That is Rob Whitney. That is the real Rob Whitney in Rob Whitney's car. Unfortunately, he's got that a little bit wrong on this occasion, and will have to return to the pit. He's still got a good few attempts left in this session with 4 minutes to go. See Andrew Whitehead out in front, just cutting the grass a little bit, using as much of the track as he dares as Matt Daly retires from this attempt. This is a very impressive performance from these drivers so far. 2 seconds separation P1 down to P7 in a car that they don't have much experience in at all. This will be a valuable weekend, obviously, not being the championship round. This will help them when it comes to the official round 3. As Barry Clayton sets his first time of the evening, and Will Inglis improves to a 123.6 using Colin Keneath's car there. The lucky Colin Keneath's car that's currently seen him get quite a nice championship lead for the moment, which I believe may have been pretty much eradicated. I'll have to double check that on the official timing screens, but I believe we are now using a dropped round effectively, which has reined Colin Keneath in just a little bit. He's obviously been driving very impressively this year, as we see someone facing the wrong direction out on track. That is Rob Whitney again. Rob Whitney may be struggling a little bit with the balance of his car. This is obviously an open setup championship. The drivers are allowed to adjust things like the suspension, the downforce, the tyre pressures, the brake balance to however they please, because they can find some decent time. However, as we have seen for Rob Whitney, perhaps that's not quite working in his favour this time around. Colin Keneath does provide a nice setup for everyone, but they are by no means obliged to take it. We see this battle for 4th position still ongoing as we enter the final minutes of qualifying. There's still a few hundreds of a second separating P4 and P6. Will Harper currently on what looked like it was going to be a decently fast lap, but he has had to retire from that attempt. He can get out and set another lap. George Brook Battersby setting a 1:22.2. Very nice lap there to take 3rd position from Matt Daly. Matt Daly, who is currently 0.3 slower than his previous best in that previous sector. This hasn't been the ideal qualifying session for Matt Daly, it must be said. And George Brook Battersby has been able to swoop in and steal 3rd position nicely. See a little bit of traffic forming heading down Pilgrim's Drop. This is an opportune place for a good number of overtakes if you are brave enough. However, it could go very wrong very quickly indeed with the amount of speed you're carrying through the Hawthorne Bend there. As it looks like to be the case for Greg Young, just getting a little bit untidy as the timer comes to an end on qualifying, and these will be the driver's final fast laps. It's still Colin Keneath on pole for the moment. Can he improve his time as he comes round the Clark curve? That's dipping a front wheel onto the grass just a little bit. That won't help him too much, however, he's still looking very racy indeed. He doesn't improve. It's still a 1:21.263, the fastest lap from Colin Keneath so far this session. Can Andrew Ayad challenge him and steal pole position at just the last second? See the car just getting a little bit untidy as he tries to get onto clearways there. He will have scrubbed off just a little bit of time, maybe about a tenth or two, maybe a little bit less, as he heads into the Clark curve now. Of course, you can lose so much time, and he looks like he is retiring from that lap there. He isn't going to be able to beat Colin Keneath this time round. He certainly put up a very good fight, but it wasn't enough to take pole from Colin. Will Matt Daly do it, though? He is heading around the Clark curve as we speak. It looks like a few laps didn't end the way that he would have wanted this time round, and no, he is entering the pit as well. So pole position for this qualifying session goes to Colin Keneath. That was a fairly decent battle for P1 in quali, and must be said, a commendable effort from Will Harper to eventually take P4 in that close battle in the midfield. We'll join you in just a moment as we enter race 1 of this weekend. Welcome back to the action here at Brands Hatch, ladies and gentlemen. It is race 1 of this weekend, ready to go. We've got Colin Knief on pole, and in just 12 seconds it will be lights out. We have the revs rising on these near enough makes no difference 500 horsepower engines. A good launch will be crucial here, especially on those on the soft tyres. As we see cars sliding about, Colin Knief getting a huge amount of oversteer off the line, and someone else getting a huge amount of oversteer off the line there. It looked to be Paul Milman. I'm not sure if that is actually Paul Milman, though. We'll find out in just a second when the timing screen updates, as we see someone take an interesting line down the bottom of Paddock Hill. And Andrew Whitehead looking on a move around the outside of Colin Knief. That gives him the inside line into the next corner, and he needed a good exit from that corner. Unfortunately, it didn't happen on that occasion, as we see Rob Whitney and Steve Knight getting some serious damage on their cars. That will not help them later on in the race. Steve Knight having to pit his car, actually, as we see what looks to be Matt Daly, although I believe that is Greg Young going a little bit wide as we head down the drop. Colin Knief still out in front for the moment, but Andrew Whitehead certainly putting the pressure on. Matt Daly in third, and George Battersby has climbed his way to fourth, as Will Harbour, who was in fourth in qualifying, has unfortunately found himself in 13th position. We've got 25 minutes in this race to go, and so far it's certainly been action-packed as Barry Clayton gets a move done on Will Inglis, although Will Inglis, unfortunately, is facing the wrong direction. That's put him down in 12th position now. Will he be able to recover and get back into the points, as it looks like Will Harper is going to be able to get past with relative ease, although I say that. No, it was done in the end. I wasn't quite sure if it was going to be able to be done under braking, as we see Greg Young trying to fight his way through the order. He's putting pressure on George Battersby, as we see Matt Daly swapping around onto the other side of the circuit to prepare himself for Paddock Hill, as it looks like we have a few drivers having accidents, unfortunately, on this first lap of the race, so they will be on for a recovery drive. We are still having a couple of errors with the servers, so my apologies for that. We've got a little bit of instability on my end by the looks of things, so we may have a sudden dropout, but all seems to be going well so far, as Colin Knief extends that gap to about a second, and he comes across his first lap traffic, Steve Knight, who had to pit earlier on. As Barry Clayton has an issue that puts him down into 10th position there. Will he be able to get it back up to speed in time to defend from Will Harper? He won't be able to. He has to move to the side and allow Will Harper to take 10th position, as Colin Knief is looking for a way past Steve Knight in 14th position, and he gets that, but Andrew Whitehead doesn't. Colin Knief will be very happy with that, I am sure. It came at the wrong place, wrong time for Andrew Whitehead, where he needed to get that overtake. He has done it now, but that has not helped him at all in terms of catching back up to Colin. He will be hoping to put some pressure on in the next couple of laps, or maybe force an error, as we see Colin was 3/10 lap quicker on the previous time round. We have actually heard from the guys behind the scenes that everything else is looking okay with this session. It's just deliveries that are an issue, which makes it a little bit more tricky for me, but I will carry on, and I'll be more than happy to do so, as we see Matt Daly trying to use as much of the track as possible, as George Battersby, what a shame, looking like he had some really good pace in this car at times, but it's all gone wrong for him, as Steve Knight gets it wrong and nearly takes Matt Daly out with him. Yeah, George Battersby now finding himself in 8th, maybe technical issues, as it looks like we have got quite a lot of lag on the server, actually, as Matt Daly levitates and then proceeds to no longer exist. That's quite an interesting one. Andrew Whitehead closing up on Colin Knief just a little bit now. Maybe those server issues are playing to his hands ever so slightly, as we see cars gaining positions in Matt Daly and George Battersby's absence, rather, if I can get my words out. But yes, so I was about to say that despite the liveries, it looks like everything else is going according to plan, so the results from this round may actually stand after all, but it looks like we're having a couple of server issues, as Andrew Whitehead sets the fastest lap of the race so far, a 1:22.3 flat, effectively. You see Colin Knief going quite deep into Paddock Hill Bend there, whereas Andrew Whitehead was much happier to stick to the tarmac there. Maybe he's found a little bit of a quicker line where the cars happier on exit, as we see Colin Keith really is using as much track as possible, as we have a dropout from Matt Daly there. I think we're having just a couple of issues with the server, unfortunately. We have just over 20 minutes to go in this race, and it certainly has provided some great action so far. We'll be hoping that we can see that through to the end, as these two really have been in a league of their own. They've pretty much built a 10-second gap to Greg Young in third now. He's found himself in third, capitalising on other people's misfortunes. So he'll be fairly happy with his running so far, as we see Colin Keith getting achingly close to dipping onto the gravel, and Andrew Wyatt actually dipping onto the gravel. I am sure I'm going to start calling Andrew Wyatt Rob Whitney with this livery on this car at some point, as we have James Rose side by side with Will Harper as they head down the dip. And Will Harper was very brave to hang it around the outside there, but James Rose likewise also very brave to not back out of it pretty much and keep his car on that inside line, and he didn't concede easily at all, as it looks like Andrew Wyatt has just started to drop away a little bit from Colin Keith on that occasion. Colin Keith absolutely blistering on that occasion, a 121.7. He is going very fast. These top three runners running on the medium tyres. They're looking to be the ideal tyre for this car at this circuit. The softs are anywhere from about 0.3 to half a second quicker per lap, but there is big doubts as to whether or not they would make it to the end of the race. You probably have to really extend your gap, which to be fair these two drivers have done, and then allow the times to drop off at the end if you want to make the softs work. But these drivers are opting to go onto the medium, which will happily make it to the end. The hards are not, pretty much not in contention at all this weekend. They are just too hard of a compound to get working in this 156 TCR, WTCC car. As we see Andrew Whitehead using a little bit of curb, as Paul Millman and Will Harper have had a collision, unfortunately. Those two are side by side. That is a very confusing collision to see happening, as it looks like Will Harper is the Paul Millman out of the two Paul Millmans on screen at the moment, who have got out in front as they head down the dip now, with James Rose close behind. So Will Harper is really on for a decent recovery drive so far. We have just under 20 minutes of this race remaining, and he has found 5 positions already compared to his position on lap 2. He could be on for a flyer here. He's looking very racy indeed in this car, as Andrew Wyatt improves on his new personal best at 122.1. So he certainly has got the pace, but it looks like Colin Keith was able to just edge out just a little bit more on him so far within this race. Although there may be differences, actually there's not differences in setup between these two drivers. They are running the same setup. It's Colin's setup. But maybe Colin is going all out to try and build that gap at the start of the race, a little bit of an air gap where he can relieve that pressure later on. And Andrew Whitehead's able to look after his tyres just a little bit better toward the end and maybe put some pressure on in the final few laps of this race. We've seen how quickly a race can unravel itself in this championship and at this track. There's plenty of gravel alongside, which may look tempting when you're travelling at speeds of around 150, 160 miles an hour. Probably a little bit less around Brands Hatch, although they do have 500 horsepower to play with. Yeah, I'm sure those gravel traps could look relatively tempting actually at those types of speeds. These two absolutely in a league of their own. Nearly 15 seconds separating them and P3. And Andrew Whitehead for the first time has dipped into the 121s, so the times are dropping. He's now within a second of Colin Keith. He will be getting that all-important slipstream heading down the longer straights now, and is able to put just that little bit more pressure on. One tiny mistake could really see him on the rear diffuser of the car in front, as it looks like Will Inglis has unfortunately currently running P11 has had an error, and a really, really bad place to get out of. To have an error. Luckily he was able to whack it in reverse and get out of the way as quickly as possible, or otherwise he would have had a fairly nasty collision with, that was either Will Harper or Paul Millman. I'm not quite sure who that was. As we see Steve Knight as well, who was struggling on the first couple of laps of this race, currently running P10 in the points owing to a couple of disconnections that we had earlier on. As Rosie Hodson sets her fastest lap of the race so far, running nicely in ninth at the moment, as we see Barry Clayton's had a bit of an error, but is not under too much pressure for the moment. See Colin Keith dipping onto the grass just a little bit as he tries to head down clearways there. It's not... those little mistakes can add up, make quite a big difference. It's a sprint race, but it's a 25-minute sprint race. And those little mistakes can just eat into your time a little bit and be quite, I don't know, kind of motivating to the car behind, really, to try and push them that little bit more. I must say, these 156s do look absolutely incredible heading down Paddock Hill Bend there. The stance of them is is a sight to behold, really. Can't absolutely slam to the ground. Not much is shared between this and the regular road-going 156. The biggest difference being which wheels are powered. These are, of course, a rear-wheel drive car, as Andrew Whitehead has handily demonstrated around the left-hander there, with a little kick at the back end. I'm sure that was all perfectly orchestrated from our side there, and that has unfortunately cost him quite a bit of time. He's now looking to be about 1.8 seconds separating them and Colin now, with just over 50 minutes to go in this race. So as I was saying, Andrew might have been hoping for a couple of mistakes to creep in on Colin's side to try and gain some time on him, but unfortunately for Andrew, that has happened to him now. There's now about a 2-second gap, and the pressure might be off Colin a little bit, and he can settle into this race, find a decent rhythm, and build a little bit of a gap to the car behind and bring it home. So we have quite a nice interior shot here. We just see the cars absolutely revving the nuts off, it must be said. Getting close to 8,000 RPM in these 4-cylinder engine cars. 500 horsepower is an impressive number in such a lightweight car, under a ton. It surprises me actually that the car is feeling so good to drive. They're obviously carrying a fair bit of downforce. It's quite an impressive power to weight ratio, and the cars seem relatively drivable for it. And the upside of having such a powerful car, say in comparison to the 75 that we ran in round 1, is that you can afford to maybe make a couple of little mistakes and make up for it on corner exit, where you've got the power to carry it through up to the next corner. Whereas in the 75, if you scrub off quite a lot of speed, as Alan Matthews has there, dipping onto the grass a little bit, if you scrub off a lot of speed, you're really paying the price for it through some of the longer sweeping corners, where the car just hasn't quite got the grunt or the torque to get you back up to pace. But these cars are certainly not lacking in that department. James Rose here has been running quite nicely. He's 2 cars in front, Paul Millman and Will Harper. Will Harper has gained a little bit of a gap now, but he's been not too far off Paul Millman at all in this race. He does have Steve Knight to contend with to get past. Currently a lap down on these 2 drivers here, but could be on for a nice little battle here as the laps start coming down. We're around about the halfway point in this race. James Rose also a medium runner, as is Paul Millman, so there shouldn't be any major issues in terms of tyre life. In fact, our only soft runners in this race are Will Harper, Alan Matthews and Will Inglis, so maybe this pace that we're seeing from Will Harper is aided ever so slightly by the soft tyres that he's running, and they may come to a bit of a cliff edge towards the end of the race. He'll have to try and avoid any spin outs or any major oversteer. He'll have to start thinking about looking after them now if he wants to maintain his current position. As we have drivers like Barry Clayton, Paul Millman, James Rose, who are by no means slow, and that gap could quickly come down if he's battling with the car towards the end of the race, trying to keep it on the around this stage of the race. He is one of only 3 drivers, as I mentioned just a second ago, to have such concerns. Everyone else running on the medium tyres on this occasion. So we see Andrew Whitehead using quite a lot of the track available to him there, in fact more than the track available to him, dipping onto the grass just a little bit there, and that gap is building ever so slightly now sitting at about 2.5 seconds. He's done a very impressive job so far at the halfway stage of this race to keep this close to Colin, especially given he admitted himself he doesn't have too much time in the seat in this car. He's doing a mighty fine job indeed. These two are absolutely in a league of their own, running their own race effectively. As we see Steve Knight, unfortunately, just getting it wrong there as we joined him. At the exit of Druids there, he will have picked up a little bit of aero damage, and it looks to be, according to the reports from the pit lane, that he has some fairly major damage in terms of rear and from downforce, which won't be helping him at this point in the race. He's currently a lap down. Looks like Will Inglis is another lap down on him, so he's not under too much pressure for the moment. Rob Whitney has rejoined the session. He is currently 9 laps down. I imagine he'll be treating this as a bit of a testing session for the moment. See Andrew Wyatt heading through Druids now. He does have a little bit of lapped traffic to contend with, separating him and Colin Knief. It looks like he'll be wanting to get out of the way, but I believe that is Greg Young. It isn't Greg Young, it's someone else using a similar livery to Greg Young. Apologies if you can hear the noise outside. It is someone with a particularly loud exhaust on their car. As we see whoever it was in front of Andrew Wyatt getting it just a little bit wrong as he heads towards the dip. And finds himself pointing in the wrong direction. Yeah, it was luckily for Andrew Wyatt, who was able to get out of the way just in time. It looked like he was going a little bit wrong out in front of him, but no major harm done. He's still around that 2-second mark. That gap is staying relatively consistent, giving the time elapsed in this race so far. I will have to ask the engineers, actually. I'll have to see what exactly is the engine in this car. It's definitely a 4-cylinder. I believe it's based on the 2-litre twin spark. That was so common in Alfas of the time. A fabulous little engine that 2-litre twin spark is. Although I say little, it's quite big by modern standards. Very characterful as well. I imagine this car will be running a extreme variant of that. This is actually named officially the 156 Extreme WTCC, so it would make perfect sense for the engine to also be equally as extreme as Andrew Wyatt. That gap is extending just a little bit through Sector 2. It looks like Sector 2 is where he's dropping most of the time to Colin, specifically Surtees there, where we saw him get a little bit of oversteer before. As he heads down the dip now, that gap is sitting at 3 seconds, extending just a little bit. We've got under 10 minutes to go in this race now, and Colin Knief has led every single lap. He's pretty much led every single corner, apart from Turn 1 and Druids, where it looked like Andrew Wyatt was thinking about a move around the outside, but it wasn't to be, unfortunately, for Andrew. As we see some drivers entering the pits, Steve Knight entering the pits there, maybe thinking about whacking a set of softs on and improving his quality performance in case we have a repeat of this round. It looks like these results could actually stand. I will double check during the intermission, but if they don't, this will be a valuable bit of experience for these drivers in this new car. As we have Will Inglis unlapping himself with Steve Knight entering the pits. Will Inglis now got a nice gap to Steve Knight behind and finds himself in the points now. As we see Rosie Hodson side by side with Will Harper. Will Harper getting past easily. Rosie very courteous there to let the car lapping her get past as they head around the Clark curve now, and Will Harper starts another lap. See Collins actually still lapping in the 121s, which at this stage in the race is mighty impressive. Something Andrew wasn't able to do on the previous lap. He was about 7/10 slower on the previous time round. So even, I suppose the fuel loads are getting lighter, but even as the tyres are getting a little bit older, a little bit more tired, that pace has by no means disappeared. He's pretty much lapping as he was in qualifying, as some drivers were lapping in qualifying, and as he was at the start of the race on brand new fresh tyres. we've seen a lot of drivers finding a little bit of time on exit as they head through the Graham Hill bend there, where you kind of go off the tarmac and ride over the curb and use that to allow you to carry a bit more speed through that sharp left-hander. It doesn't affect your exit too much because you are carrying so much speed, and these cars, while very powerful, don't have an insane amount of torque behind them, although they are, as I mentioned, fairly powerful. They're not going to upset the back axle too much, as you see Andrew Whitehead getting very creative with that curb on the right-hander there, as it looks like Alan Matthews and Rob Whitney have had a little bit of contact there. Rob Whitney facing the wrong direction at Druids, and Alan Matthews able to carry on running for the moment. What a shame for Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney doing very well in the AM Championship at the moment, and if this race result stands, it certainly won't be helping his fight at the moment. See Andrew Whitehead getting past some lap traffic there. I don't believe we've seen that livery so far tonight. Actually, we might have seen it on a couple of occasions. I believe that was Barry Clayton. Yes, it is. Has Barry Clayton got his own car? He doesn't. He has Rosie's car. Does Rosie have her own car? Rosie does not have her own car. Rosie has Matt Daly's car. What a fun puzzle this is. I think we should do this more often, actually. I think we should get rid of the timing tower and try and guess. Try and figure out whether people are actually who they say they are. A little bit of Cluedo on track. Why not? See, Will Harper is now only 3 seconds behind Alan Matthews. If he's able to carry this pace on as these soft tyres get older, he could be on for 4th position if Alan Matthews doesn't watch out. He's getting closer and closer by the lap. He's been lapping quite nicely so far, actually. He set a previous time of 1:23.3. That is 5/10 of a second quicker. Actually, Alan Matthews in front, also on the soft tyres, so he will be having any of the same issues, I imagine. Pretty much the same behaviour from his car at this point as Will Harper behind. So we could be on for a good battle between these two as we head into the final stages of this race. We are now 5 minutes until the checkered flag, pretty much. And Colin Knief still lapping in the low 122s, high 121s. Andrew Whitehead not too far behind. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to shrink that 1 second, 2 second gap that stood for so long during this race. It now stands at about 4 seconds. But these two really have been the class of the field. Nearly 30 seconds separating the top two runners and P3. And the gap between Alan Matthews and Will Harper, the battle for 4th position as he heads onto clearways now, staying at around 3 seconds, dipping just a little bit under now. Maybe does Alan Matthews have the advantage down the straight? It doesn't look to be the case. Looks like Will Harper maybe getting a little bit of a better exit onto clearways. He's able to close that gap ever so slightly. It now stands at about 2.7 seconds as we enter the final few laps of this race now. See a lock-up for Alan Matthews. Those softs starting to struggle. Will Harper echoes that heading into Druids there. These softs really starting to struggle at this stage in the race, and those type of lock-ups are the type of thing that Will Harper will be hoping to avoid. We'll be hoping Alan Matthews carries on to make tiny little, they're not even errors as such, I suppose. They're just the driver trying to battle with that car, which as we head towards the end of the race won't be particularly happy at this stage. Now about 2 seconds that gap as we are on the final couple of laps of this race at this stage. Andrew Whitehead, what a shame that this race wouldn't have turned out the way that he had wanted. It'll be bittersweet. I'm sure he'll be happy with P2 regardless, but he knows that he certainly has had the pace for the win. He has been on the coattails of, he's been pretty much on the heel of Colin Knief the entire race. Just showing a couple of errors, slipping in every now and again. That has allowed Colin to build up a little bit of a gap. And speaking of a gap, it is closing down ever so slightly as they head down clearways. Now about 2 seconds separating Alan Matthews and Will Harper. He's found about a second, about half a second to a second on the previous couple of laps. As we are now on the penultimate lap of the race, unless Colin is able to come round and cross the check flag in time. Doesn't look like he'll be able to at this stage in the race. That 2 second gap staying there as they head through Druids now. Will's going to have to put in an absolute blinder if he wants to take 4th position at this rate. It can be done though, as we've seen so many times before in this year's running. All it takes is one little error to creep in. And the results of the race can be turned on the head entirely. That wasn't a particularly fast lap from Colin on that occasion, and it was an absolute flyer from Andrew Whitehead, his best of the race so far, 121.5. Is this too little too late for Andrew Whitehead? As we head now, we are now on the penultimate lap of this race. We've now found a bit of pace in Andrew Whitehead's car, and unfortunately, a little bit of that pace has been scrubbed off on the exit of Druids there. The car getting a little bit unhappy as he heads over the grass. And any charge that he was thinking of making may or may not have been diluted now as they head round the circuit for the second to last time of the first race of this evening. That gap staying around 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds for Will Harper. This must be absolutely frustrating and very stressful for Alan Matthews out in front, because he knows fourth position isn't entirely secure. As you see, it looks like Alan Matthews and Will Harper are both being fairly careful heading around Druids now, as Colin Keefe has some lap traffic to contend with as he instead heads around the Clark curve. They get past that nicely. Andrew Whitehead's going to have to wait just a little bit longer to get past that car as Colin Keefe starts his final lap. Colin Keefe's pace really has dipped off a little bit, and Andrew Whitehead has followed, probably owing to that oversteer we saw at Druids. But yeah, I mentioned Andrew may be thinking about preserving his tyres until later on to try and charge, to bring a charge against Andrew, but yeah, too little too late perhaps. Still a very impressive performance nonetheless. And there's less than a second separating these two drivers now. Alan Matthews is really trying to put his foot down to keep Will Harper behind. Will Harper's been thinking about this the entire race. He was pretty much at the bottom of the field for at one point in this race, and now he fancies his chances at an overtake as they head towards the Clark curve. But it's Colin Keefe heading down the dip on his final lap. We're going to stick with Will Harper as they start their final lap heading around the Clark curve. He is less than half a second separating these two drivers now. Alan Matthews got his headlights on. I'm sure he'll be wishing he has those off. Maybe save a little bit on the alternator, just a little bit. Try and eke out as much power as he can as he heads down the Paddock Hill bend. Will Harper putting that pressure on as Colin Keefe heads down onto clearways, dealing with some lap traffic. Once again, they head round Druids, but Will Harper hasn't found a way around just at this moment in time. It's Colin Keefe heading round the Clark curve with some lap traffic to contend with, but he won't be too bothered as he crosses the line to take first position. A very well-deserved first position for Colin, who's been the class of the field, as has Andrew Whitehead. But it's Will Harper and Alan Matthews battling on the very last lap of this race. It's what he's been waiting for. They're heading down the dip themselves. If he's going to think of a brave move around the outside, it looks like it. He's a little bit too far back, though, and he will still be behind Alan Matthews as they head down Westfield now. And he dips onto the grass a little bit. That won't be helping him too much as they head towards Stirling now. Actually, I've got a little bit ahead of myself there, thinking the track's shorter than it is. I am sure Will Harper wants this track to be longer than it currently is as they head around Stirling's, and Will Harper gets it a little bit untidy, and unfortunately I think that was his final attempt at the overtake perhaps, and it's all gone wrong for him. They're heading around the Clark curve, and it doesn't look like Will is carrying enough speed to challenge him as Greg Young crosses the line in third. Alan Matthews, a very, very well-defended fourth, and a very hard-fought fifth for Will Harper. Impressive driving between these two drivers. Well done, well fought to the very last second. As we see the rest of the drivers finishing their race. Paul Millman is the final driver on the lead lap to take home 6th position, leading the AM race on this occasion. Well done to Paul for that. He crosses the line in 6th position. Well, that was certainly an action-packed race one here at Brands Hatch as the drivers come to the end of the parade lap. It's just the end lap, but I'm sure they'll be celebrating these two. They did a mighty job this time around, and we'll be joining you in a few minutes for race 2, the reverse grid, here at Brands Hatch. Let's hope it's as exciting as this one has been. And welcome back to the action here at Brands Hatch. It's the final part of the weekend at the reverse grid race. This is the one that I might struggle with actually when it comes to the liveries. Luckily the name tags are there so I can see that Matt Daly is in P2. It is George Battersby on pole. Two very fast drivers. Actually I say that. No, that is the case. Yeah, George will have to watch out for Matt behind in P2 as they head down Paddock Hill. There's some mighty fine drivers up front on the grid this time around, owing to the issues that we had earlier on. See, it looks like we've got a little bit of an empty grid actually, a little bit of a gap. Hopefully the server issues are not going to affect the running too much. We have 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away. Rob Whitney joining just in time there to get racing with us as we see someone diving onto the grass a little bit. It's George still on P1. He got a nice launch there, and as they head down Paddock Hill, Matt Daly was looking at a move around the outside. He's going to have the outside line for Druids, but it might work for him. He's able to carry more speed in, and unfortunately he's collided with George on lap 1 at Druids. Well, George is able to carry on there. I'm not quite sure what to make of that one. It looks like George could have maybe moved to the right just a little bit more, or maybe Matt Daly closed the door too early. Hard to say in such a high-pressure situation, but that's promoted Will Inglis to second, Rob Whitney, Andrew Ayed rather, to third. He's had a very good start to this race. Meanwhile, his main contender from the previous race is running P7 and is having a little bit of an argy-bargy as they head down the dip now. He is behind Alan Matthews in the identically liveried car, who is contending with Greg Young at the moment. These are a lot of cars occupying the same bit of tarmac at the moment. Let's hope everyone makes it through lap 1 in a clean fashion. But Andrew Ayed, we've seen he has race leading pace, and he is behind Will Inglis and George Battersby, two very fast drivers. Let's hope that this battle carries on throughout the rest of the race. I'll be certainly looking forward to watching that, as there's a big crash through Sterling's there. That involved Alan Matthews, that involved James Rose, that involved Rosie Hodson, that involved Greg Young, and as I mentioned, Alan Matthews there. Quite a few drivers unfortunately taken out in that one incident. It was only a matter of time, I think, with just how many cars were occupying the same amount of the circuit as Paul Millman is trying to keep Rosie Hodson and Barry Clayton behind at this stage of the race. Barry Clayton opting to use the outside line round Paddock Hill there, and Rosie Hodson sticking behind Paul Millman, putting a lot of pressure on him. It's George Battersby out in front at the moment. Andrew Ayed has got past Will Inglis for second position. Will Inglis opting to do some rallycross there as he exits Graham Hill Bend, and loses about a second to Andrew Ayed in front. Colin Knief then wasn't looking too good for him on lap 1, but he found himself in P4 now. With Will Harper for company, hitting speeds of about 155, 156 miles an hour in these cars. Very heavy braking zone there. What happened to Matt Daly? He did mention he was having a couple of server connection issues in race 1, and I think unfortunately that looks to be the case again. This has really unravelled for him in the space of just a couple of laps. As part of the trials and tribulations of virtual racing there, lag can sometimes appear when you least want it to, as it looks like down clearways Colin Knief got a better exit out of Sterling's and tries to hang it round the outside at Clark Curve. Will it stick? He got a better exit out of Sterling. Will he get the better exit out of Clark Curve? It looks to be the case. They are pretty much wheel to wheel, and he's going to have to hang it around the outside again at Paddock Hill, but he's very brave, keeps the speed going there. It's arguably the better line if you can afford to keep the speed going without scrubbing off too much. And that has worked for him to steal third position then. He'll be trying to catch up to Andrew Whitehead, who needs to get past George Battersby. I think if he has any hope at keeping this race victory, he'll be hoping that George can fight with Colin. He just needs to get past him himself. See Will Harper now contending with Will Inglis. Will Harper had an amazing recovery drive in the last race, ended up P5, very nearly P4. Had the final lap gone his way. And he's fighting for P4 at the moment, but luckily for him it's much earlier on in this race. As you see Andrew Whitehead still about half a second behind George Battersby. He has had a very nice start to this race indeed, however his progress has been hampered ever so slightly with the very quick George out in front. George, a newcomer to the series this year, but his pace has been so impressive he is now been promoted to the Pro class. We we have Paul Millman currently leading the AM race down in 7th. He's got a nice bit of clean air actually as he heads down clearways. He could be on for another good result. He had a good result in race 1, and he will be closing up that championship, that gap in the points in the championship to Rob Whitney. See Rosie Hodson getting past Steve Knight. Oh no, Steve Knight getting past Rosie Hodson. Pardon me there for that one, as it looks like Rosie Hodson had a bit of an error on that lap, 1:32 there. Steve being 6 seconds a lap quicker. There must have been an error involved in that one. And Andrew Wyatt is thinking about a move around the outside as they come on to Pilgrim's Drop now. He was looking at it around 30s, but he's going to try and get it done as he heads into Hawthorne then. And that was very nicely done indeed. Braked as late as possible and was able to secure P1 then. He needs to build a gap to George behind, and George George will be battling to take back P1, but he doesn't want to lose too much time by battling with Andrew. He may want to start thinking about a defence against Colin Knief. Of course, if these three get embroiled in a large enough battle, it could soon be Will Inglis and Will Harper back in contention for the podium. Will Harper and Greg Young very close on the heels of Will Inglis as they head down clearways themselves. A nice little train forming at the top of the midfield. As Colin Knief set an absolute flyer on that previous lap, a 121.6 with a full fuel load and some nice warm tyres. This car's working an absolute treat for him. His nearest rivals are at least a couple of seconds slower that time round. He's now only half a second separating him and George. We could have a repeat of the battling that we saw on lap 1 of the previous race. As Will Inglis exits Graham Hill Bend and heads through Surtees, now we can see Will Harper darting his car around on the circuit, thinking about a move, but he's now hunting for that slipstream as they head down the fastest part of the circuit, the Pilgrim's Drop. There's only 2 tenths separating Colin Knief and George Brook Battersby out in front. Colin putting an immense amount of pressure on George at this point in the race as they come towards the final sector of the lap. That gap has opened up just a little bit there. You can't keep that close to the car behind without some ill effects in terms of aerodynamics, but that doesn't seem to be the case for Colin this time round as they head round Clearway and round Clark Curve. He hangs it round the outside and gets the move done onto the start-finish straight, and now it's Colin Knief in second. Andrew Ware was able to get a little bit of a gap on the previous lap, about half a second between him and Colin Knief. There's about 2 seconds separating, but Colin Knief can now start eating into that gap. Now he's dispatched George Brook Battersby, who's now running P3. This battle for P4, it's separated by about 4 tenths between the 3 drivers involved. Will Inglis going around the outside there. Druids maybe carrying a little bit too much speed in the braking. Braked a little bit too late. Will Harper thought about a move, but I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe a bit too late on the brakes for Will, but he's punted the rear end of Will Inglis. That's unsettled Will Inglis' car through Graham Hill Bend and allowed Greg Young to take 4th position as they head through Surtees now. But it's really upset Will Harper's car. He's found himself now in P6. What a shame that charge for Will Harper has come to an end. He's still running P6, so maybe a decent recovery drive towards the end. He's running on those soft tyres, whereas the 2 cars in front are running on the mediums. So now, this kind of midway stage in the race, now is his chance to eat into that gap. Leave Paul Millman behind in P7 in the identically liveried car there, and try and see if he can contend for that P5, P4 again. Still be a nice haul of points as he has had on a few occasions in this championship in this year's running. And Joe Whitehead certainly putting on a good display out in P1 at the moment, still improving on his personal bests, trying to keep Colin Knief at bay for the moment. And he's doing a mighty fine job so far. We saw they were pretty much neck and neck in terms of pace. Colin Knief just had the slight advantage through sector 2. And Colin will be hoping that he's sorted that little tiny deficit there. George gets a little bit unsettled on the exit of Graham Hill Bend. And that gap between him and Colin starts to increase just a little bit. He'll be, I imagine, at this stage in the race, trying to find a decent rhythm and secure himself a podium scoring position. Further down the grid, we had Alan Matthews, who ended up taking home P4 in that electrifying battle between him and Will Harper in the previous race, currently running P9 with Rosie Hodson to contend with. They are doing a very nice job at the bottom end of the points there. As we've had, actually owing to all of the issues that we had early on in the race, it's been much closer this reverse grid. Everyone, apart from Barry Clayton there, who had to pit for some damage, or I believe had some connection issues actually, able to still be on the lead lap at this stage. That wasn't the case previous time around, as Andrew Whitehead dips a little bit too far onto the gravel for his liking. I'm sure that's closed up that gap hugely now. There's less than a second in it between these two drivers as they head round Druids. That's not the news I'd imagine Andrew Whitehead would want to hear right now. Or it's not the Alfa 156 Scudetto grille I'm sure he'd want to hear, or he'd want to see rather, in his rear view mirrors. Now about half a second separating them as they head round Surtees. Colin Knief, that all-important Sector 2, it's gone so much better for him on this occasion. They're going to head down Pilgrim's Drop now. Colin Knief's got the slipstream. Is he brave under braking? Is he going to dive on the brakes at the very last moment? He thought about it, but he thinks better of it. That would have been too risky, I think, at this stage. He'll have to set himself up nicely. I imagine he'll think about a move heading through clearways. It was textbook on George as he hung it around the outside through Clark Curve. He'll be thinking about that move again, I am sure, at this stage when he's this close to the car in front. See the rear ends of these two cars heading down clearways now. Then you see this later facelift of this car. It's probably not the time for a little bit of 156 nerdery, but I just like the 156 too much, unfortunately. Don't know all myself, unfortunately. It's on the list though. As they head round Paddock Hill, see the concertina effect working nicely to drag Colin Knief back towards Andrew Whitehead as they head round Druids now. The gap's opened up just a little bit there. Much to Andrew Whitehead's relief, I am sure. But yes, you can actually see in this later facelift of the 156. We'll just watch them heading through Surtees now, where it all went a little bit wrong at this point on the previous lap for Andrew. It's gone a little bit better this time. He's a little bit more tidy, and Colin wasn't able to get as close as he would have wanted. However, Willie, he's too far back to think about a move as he did on the previous time round. As we see our first instance of lapped traffic for these two drivers then. It is Barry Clayton actually running a very similar, no, it's not Barry Clayton, it's Rob Whitney running Rob Whitney's livery, with Andrew Whitehead running Rob Whitney's livery behind as they head down clearways now. You can actually see, I'll get my point across at some point, these later facelift 156s carrying a lot of visual similarity with the 159 that ended up replacing it. Of course, it was a long-running model, and you can see the rear lights and kind of the front fascia sharing a lot of similarity with that 159 that ended up replacing it. Colin Knief ever so slightly faster on this lap, and now there's some all-important lap traffic to contend with. Andrew Whitehead does a very nice job, as does Colin Knief. I was about to say Andrew Whitehead's done a very nice job, but he was a bit too late on the brakes, and Colin Knief, I'm sure, must have been grinning. He must have been absolutely grinning when he saw Andrew Whitehead just getting it a little bit wrong under braking there and leaving the door pretty much open for him. However, he was able to get a nice exit. Around Druids, if you're around the outside, you can get a fairly decent exit. And that has been the case for Andrew Whitehead, who has been able to keep Colin Knief very lucky to do so. Colin Knief saw his opportunity and he took it. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. Head down clearways again. These two drivers, as we saw in race one, really know how to battle with each other and keep on each other's heels, keep each other on each other's toes. And we head down the start-finish straight in our head, down the sweeping right hand that is Paddock Hill. Almost feel like your stomach's kind of escaping you. This drop is a fairly severe one, especially when you're travelling at a decent rate of knots. The opportunity that Colin tried to seize wasn't quite there this time round, much to Andrew Whitehead's relief. There was 2/10 in it on the previous lap. Colin managed to find 2/10 being the car that was following, enjoying that slipstream, maybe down Pilgrim's Drop, but it will have been quite a drop in aero to be this close behind, so they are doing a mighty job to keep this close to each other for so long. We have passed the halfway point in this race already. Time flies when you are having fun, and time flies when you're watching some incredible racing, as we see Alan Matthews has got past Steve Knight as they head into Druids themselves. Alan Matthews could be on for a decent point scoring position, currently running on those softs. We saw them at the final few laps of the race. They did start to have a bit of a cliff edge to them, where the two drivers that were running them in that battle, which was Will Harper and Alan himself, started to have lockups and were starting to drive a little bit more conservatively. But those softs at this point should still be just about helping him close that gap to P7 out in front. About 3/10 there. Andrew Whitehead not on the ultra defensive, not completely closing off the inside line, I imagine, so that he isn't sacrificing the exit. But it's just enough to make Colin aware that Andrew knows that he's there. As they head round Surtees, we saw Andrew Whitehead have a little bit of oversteer in the previous race around Surtees, and that has happened again for Colin Knief, but it's George Brooks Battersby who's got it all wrong around Druids. That's promoted Greg Young into third, Will Inglis into fourth. What a shame for George. We saw he was running very well in race 1 until an error put him further down the order, and that's happened again here in race 2. These cars maybe not quite as easy to drive as I had thought. They looked fairly good in testing, but it has been noted that Druids, especially the curbs of Druids, can upset these rear-wheel drive converted cars just a little bit. Of course, they aren't too big by modern standards. That wheelbase isn't huge. They are certainly bigger than the Alfa 75 that we have ran so far in this championship, and they are by every single measure imaginable bigger and heavier and more substantial than the Tartus FA01 that we run in the single-seater championship. So the drivers will obviously have to take that into consideration while they battle through these tight British circuits. But yeah, the car by modern standards isn't huge. I imagine there isn't much in this between the Giulietta and the 156. So that shorter wheelbase and the rear-wheel drive combo can mean it gets a little bit upset over the curbs as they head down Pilgrim's Drop. Now then, Colin Knief isn't quite as close as we've seen him on previous attempts. He's still putting the pressure on though. And that is the mark of a good racing driver. Went for this long against all of the odds in terms of slipstream, in terms of tyre life, maybe in terms of fuel, if you're thinking about conserving towards the end. If you can still put the pressure on this late on, you're doing a mighty fine job. It's one thing to go for a brave overtake, it's another thing to have excellent racecraft, and these two drivers certainly do. You see Alan Matthews, as mentioning, those softs may be working in his favour at this stage in the race. You have to be careful of that cliff edge, obviously, but that seems to be the case as he gets closer to Paul Millman, currently running P6, leading that AM race. He had a nice bit of space, but that looks like it's coming to an end as they head down Pilgrim's Drop now. This battle for P6 carries on through Hawthorne, and Alan Matthews will be hoping to dispatch of Paul, and he can enjoy some clean running, maybe get a little bit closer to George Brooks Battersby. If another mistake creeps in from George, he can think about P5. This half a second to a second gap to sometimes 2/10 gap. We've seen it range, we've seen it within that range at all stages of this race. Still consistent between these two drivers as they head down Pilgrim's Drop themselves. As Alan Matthews finally for him gets past Paul Millman, heading round the Clark curve. It's been quite a decent overtaking spot. It's always good to watch an overtake from there because it's the jeopardy of will the driver hang it round the outside, or will they get a little bit too greedy and find themselves on the gravel. But it looked to be fairly straightforward for Alan Matthews on this occasion as Will Harper gets past Steve Knight. Steve Knight perhaps struggling with the car just a little bit, and Will Harper on a recovery drive again in this race, much like he had in race 1. Only 2/10 separating P1 and P2 as they head down the start-finish straight. Now that gap extending just a little bit down the straight, but Colin was 0.3 a lap quicker on the previous time round. He's very close indeed, heading down the Paddock Hill bend. And he might be thinking of something around Druids, as Andrew Whitehead, a little bit too late on the brakes perhaps, goes in a little bit too deep into Druids and leaves the door open. He really is on the rear wing of Andrew's car, is Colin, as they exit Graham Hill. They are pretty much even Stevens so far through Sector 1. Let's see what they can do through Sector 2. As we saw in Race 1, it tends to be Colin's strong point, although Andrew will be learning quick and learning a lot of valuable information in this tight battling with Colin that we have seen for pretty much every single lap of this weekend's race running. I'm sure he'll be looking to get into a practice session and just enjoying a nice, quiet cruise around Brands Hatch when he hasn't got Colin Knief to contend with. As we see them head on to Clearways, once again they're pretty much neck and neck, not much to distinguish them at all. Andrew dipping onto the grass just a little bit there, kicking up a little bit of dust into Colin's windscreen. Colin using as much of the track as he dares around Clark Curve, and that gap is still around 2/10, 3/10 as they head onto another lap now. We are now pretty much within the final 5 minutes of this race. This battling has gone on for so much of it, and it looks like it's going to carry on to the bitter end. As we see a little bit of snap coming on exit for Colin Knief's car. Obviously Colin being the following car as Andrew was on the previous occasion. He'll be working those tyres just a little bit harder. Those temps will be a little bit less under control. So we see the brake disc blowing red hot into 30s. A lot of speed to deal with in these cars. He's highly tuned, highly modified, race ready 156 Extreme WTCC car. We now have less than 5 minutes of this race remaining, and it's currently Andrew Whitehead battling with Colin Knief in second as they head round the Clark Curve. There's some lapse traffic to contend with. Let's see if Andrew Whitehead can use that to his advantage, or whether or not he will, as he nearly did the previous time he had some lap traffic to contend with at Druids, nearly allowed Colin Knief to sneak past. It's currently Greg Young in P3. He capitalised on the mistakes of George Brook Battersby to take that P3. Will Inglis and Greg Young and Will Harper were battling before for third. However, Will Harper finds himself in 8th, Will Inglis in 4th, George in 5th, Alan Matthews in 6th. Paul Millman running 7th, Will Harper in 8th, as I mentioned just a moment ago. Steve Knight running 9th, Rosie Halson running 10th, Rob Whitney running 11th, and Barry Clayton running 12th. There's still only 2 tenths separating these two drivers. And this looks like it could go on for a while until the fuel tanks are running on fumes and the engines start to splutter, engines start to give in. It doesn't look like these drivers want to. So we see Andrew using a lot of curb there, picking up a little bit of dust in his wake. He looked like he'd nearly left the cards width on the outside there that Colin Knief might have been thinking of using. As they head around the Clark Curve then, it's less than a half a second as it has been for so many laps now. As we are on the final 3 laps of this race now with these 2 lead drivers. As Steve Knight gets past Will Harper, who unfortunately has to pit. And that must be the ends of his challenge for the points at this point. What a shame for him. It hasn't been an ideal weekend. Half a second gap between the 2 drivers as they head around Druids. Round the Graham Hill bend onto the Cooper Hill straight. Onto the Cooper straight. Pardon me, I'm starting to make up my own corners at this point. It's just all the excitement of this really good battling that we've had this weekend. I really do hope this does count towards the championship standings, because it certainly has all the makings of a excellent championship race. The only thing that's missing is the correct liveries, which I think have added a little bit of little bit of pizzazz, a little bit of spice to this weekend's commentating. I've thoroughly enjoyed in commentating on such an exciting weekend at Brands Hatch. It always delivers, does Brands, as we see Andrew Whitehead trying to get past Rob Whitney. There'll be a little bit of a switcheroo. Maybe it will distract Colin Keefe. I'm not sure it will, though. He knows exactly who he's hunting down. He might have been thinking about a confusion tactic there. As we head now onto the penultimate lap with these two drivers, Colin Keefe hasn't really found anywhere where he can gain a huge advantage over Andrew Whitehead. And hopefully no mistake streak in for him, as they have prepped it for Rob Whitney there, who dives onto the gravel a little bit, slowing him right down as Will Harper exits the points there. Rob Whitney now in the points, running P10. As we see Colin Keefe diving onto the grass a little bit there, carrying a bit too much speed through the Hawthorne bend. And that's the type of mistake he doesn't need to be making at this stage of the race, the penultimate lap. That extra half-second gap that he's just gifted to Andrew Whitehead could be the difference between victory and defeat, although it will feel pretty bad, this defeat. It's still P2, a very well fought P2 at that. To climb his way through the grid, through the field in this reverse grid race. He was P7 at the end of the towards the halfway point of the first lap, whereas Andrew Whitehead was running in P3, P4, P3 around that region, and he has done an impressive job to close up the gap as he has. However, they are now on the final lap heading round Druids, and so far it is Andrew Whitehead's victory to lose. These two trading blows so far in this championship, and that looks like it's carrying on as we come to the conclusion of the racing here at Brands Hatch. They are neck and neck. As it stands at the moment, it will be Colin taking one victory and Andrew Whitehead taking another victory. That may or may not be the commentator's curse. I hope not, for Andrew's sake. And that would be doing a disservice to the incredible battling that we've seen between these two drivers so far this weekend. But it looks to be that one mistake has cost him dearly. He doesn't seem to be able to get back under that half-a-second gap. At this point, he may have to rely on a mistake to come in from Andrew Whitehead. If it does happen now, it'll be very costly indeed. He has some lap traffic to contend with, although I'm not sure if that will come into effect as we head now round the effective final corner, the Clark curve. It's Andrew Whitehead who's out in front at the moment. He comes round, he comes past the checkered flag to take the Race 2 victory. Well done to Andrew Whitehead, and very hard fought. Commiserations to Colin Keefe, who takes home second position. That was an immense battle. Two very impressive drivers there. Let's hope we have more battles like that as we head further into this year's running. There's not much more to say. That was just an impressive display for both these two drivers. They've been pretty much in a class of their own on this weekend as they enjoy their parade lap heading into the pits then. I'm surprised we're not seeing any victory donuts. Maybe the stewards have had a word about just how much tire smoke we're producing sometimes with the victory donuts, especially in the Formula Alpha series. But yes, it's Greg Young who ends up taking home third position. Very well done to him. A few people in ahead of him made mistakes. George Brooks-Battersby ends up with a fourth position after those mistakes that we saw earlier on in the race. But there's not much more to say, it's other than what excellent racecraft between these two drivers. They certainly know how to push each other, they certainly know how to put pressure on each other, but they also have a huge amount of respect for each other. And that's the type of racing that we enjoy seeing, the type of racing that's such a fun to be part of, championships such as the AROC Virtual Racing Series provides. And we're only on round 3 In fact, we may be having a repeat of round 3 based on how the servers have been behaving themselves. It looks like these will be the results that we carry forward with, although I'll be more than happy to commentate on these cars around this circuit again. So it was Will and Gliss taking home 5th, Paul Millman taking home 6th, Alan Matthews was unable to get past Paul in the end and takes home 7th, Steve Knight in 8th, Rosie Hodson taking home 9th, and Rob Whitney rounding out the points in 10th with Barry Clayton in 11th. So, a new car and a familiar track, but some uncertainty with the servers meant that this weekend might have not been everything that we've expected, but it certainly did deliver. And let's hope that for round 4, when we return to the Alfa 75, that the awesome racing can carry on between these drivers. Until then, I will see you in a fortnight. However, we do have the Formula Alpha series continues next week at Zandvoort, and I'm very much looking forward to commentating that. Actually, Zandvoort's a favourite of mine. So I'll hopefully see you for that, and then I'll see you in a fortnight's time when we're back in some TCR cars. Until then, it's a goodbye from me.